Thank you for coming back on board. This is Pillars of History. We thank you for being part of the family. Today we are going to cover one of the most forgotten stories and a less known figure by the names of Jean-Baptiste Ouédraogo. The forgotten man before Sankara, Jean-Baptiste Ouédraogo's story. In the heart of West Africa lies Burkina Faso, a land of resilience, revolution, and unfinished dreams. The name Thomas Sankara echoes across the continent as the African Che Guevara. But before the revolution, before the iconic speeches and radical reforms, there was another man, quiet, cautious, and almost forgotten. This is the story of Jean-Baptiste Ouédraogo, the man who briefly held the reins of power before the storm of Sankara changed everything. The rise of a military doctor, Jean-Baptiste Ouédraogo. Jean-Baptiste Ouédraogo was born on June 30th, 1942 in Kaya, Upper Volta, now known as Burkina Faso. A devout Catholic and a trained physician, Ouédraogo was not your typical military man. He was gentle, intellectual, and far from a firebrand revolutionary. After completing his medical studies in France, he returned home to serve in the military medical corps. His competence and calm demeanor earned him respect. When political unrest gripped the nation in 1980s and the ruling regime of President Saye Zabo collapsed, a new path opened. On November 7, 1982, after a bloodless coup led by military, Jean-Baptiste Ouédraogo was chosen to lead the provisional government as president of the Military Council of Recovery for National Progress, the CMRPN. The CMRPN. But why him? That is a question to be asked. Because he was neutral, non-political, a safe bet among dangerous ambitions. But the neutrality would soon become his greatest weakness. We are going to another part, that is part 2, his clash with the great Thomas Sankara. Among the officers who brought Ouédraogo to power was a charismatic young captain named as Thomas Sankara. Sankara was passionate, radical, and deeply influenced by Marxism, Pan-Africanism, and anti-imperialism by that time. Ouédraogo appointed him as prime minister in January 1983, a move that would come to define his presidency. Almost instantly, Sankara began electrifying the youth, organizing workers, and calling for an end to French neo-colonialism. This did not sit well with conservative elites or with France. By May 1983, tensions reached a boiling point. Under pressure from foreign powers and internal factions, Ouédraogo dismissed Sankara and placed him under a house arrest. This sparked mass protests and created deep divisions within the army. And then it happened. On August 4th, 1983, Captain Blaise Compaoré, Sankara's close ally, led a coup that toppled Ouédraogo and freed Sankara. With barely 9 months in power, Jean-Baptiste Ouédraogo was out and Sankara was in. You see how power goes, it comes fast and it goes very fast. So on another part, we are going to see the silent aftermath. How he lived his life after politics when he was overthrown. After the coup, Jean-Baptiste Ouédraogo was not executed. He was detained briefly, then released in a rare act of mercy in volatile politics of Africa. Sankara allowed him to return to civilian life. Sankara was not a murderer. He allowed him to return to normal life and be a normal person. Ouédraogo later opened a private clinic in Ouagadougou and lived a largely quiet life, occasionally commenting on national affairs but never returning to power. He remains alive today, a forgotten witness, one of Africa's most dramatic political transformations. Now let's see his legacy and lessons, what we learn from his way of life and his leadership. Jean-Baptiste Ouédraogo's presidency may have been brief and unremarkable on the surface, but it represents a crucial moment in Burkina Faso's journey. He was the last of the old order, the cautious intellectual trying to hold together a crumbling system. Ouédraogo's fall created the path for Sankara's revolution dream, and ultimately for the political turbulence and continues today. His story reminds us that not every chapter in history is written in fire and fury. Some are written in quiet hesitation, in caution, and in lost chances. Today, as Captain Ibrahim Traore leads a new generation of revolution in Burkina Faso, it is worth remembering not just the fiery leaders, but also the quiet ones. As Traore now, he is on top of the revolution that is taking place in Burkina Faso. We not only remember him or Thomas Sankara, but also Ouédraogo was one of the important iconic figures that have ever led Burkina Faso from crashes to something. He laid the foundation for Thomas Sankara, one of the greatest leaders that Africa has ever had. During his time, Sankara was the most influential president, like the way you see Traore now. He was never questioned because his speeches echoed across the continent. But also, we should also acknowledge the leadership of Jean-Baptiste Ouédraogo as one of the great leadership in Burkina Faso because he laid the foundation for the great Thomas Sankara to achieve his dreams and continue to influence other people and take the revolution in front. So these stories are very known and we should get a lot of lessons from this. Living a humble life, making yourself a servant to the people. If you serve the people as your entrusted power tool, you should always be, or you will never be, lost in people's mind. But Ouédraogo, why he was overshadowed, it was because Thomas Sankara had radical revolutionary movements. Because what he was doing, he was a radicalist, like the way we see Kwame Nkrumah, like Abdel Nasser of Egypt. These people were radicals, like the way we see Captain Ibrahim Traore. If he says that today, I don't want anything there, definitely he doesn't want it. That is a radical. If he gives an order, that order must work for there and then. No any question. It should not be questioned or it should not be taken serious. If he says that I want this one, definitely should be done. Those are radicals. They are not capitalists or like these other people or moderates. Moderates are these people like we see Nelson Mandela. We all honor Nelson Mandela, but he was not a great leader. Actually, that's what I can clarify on. He was not a great leader. He didn't free South Africa from the forces of apartheid, from foreign forces that are still plundering South Africa now. He was a good leader, fine, but he was not as such a leader that South Africa needed by that time. Okay, I said you too. Thank you. Let's meet.
Our army is very weak, so that France can always have the argument to exist here. Under their influence, they had succeeded. Our sentinels were therefore standing guard with sticks. That's what France wants from our armies. When we reach this stage, we have no choice but to want them to come and settle. But the Burkinabe army managed to get rid of the military advisors. Unfortunately, I think that in 2019, after Operation Otapono, where the French saw that the Burkinabe army still had the capacity to respond to terrorists, they called the chiefs of staff in France. They instructed him to reintegrate the military advisors throughout the structure. Well, they did not agree. But upon returning to the country, the politicians instructed him to accept the military advisors. And that's when the military advisors returned to the Burkinabe army in 2019. With all the consequences we know, the army was on the verge of disappearing in the years 2020-2021. And indeed, this is the time when many soldiers had to desert because there was no longer any hope. We were in the process of collapsing. That's a bit how they work at the General Staff headquarters. In all army headquarters, in the schools, they are the ones who are supposed to dictate the policy of our army. They are the ones who tell us when to recruit, how to recruit, and what to do with them. They are in the schools to tell us how to train them, and so on. As long as these military advisors are there, you are not independent. Your army will just have the appearance of an army that is there to perform parades, a circus. But when war comes, you will realize that a parade is one thing, but war is another thing. You have to break the agreements. It's the only way to have an independent army and build strength. But many people do not understand this, perhaps. And even with these agreements, France selects from our states officer cadets to go and train them. It's through these same agreements. But in reality, these officers who go to train, for the most part for France, they come to serve the French state in their country. They do not come to serve our countries. They train them so that they come to serve the interests of the French state. I can provide evidence of this. When we revolted, many officers in Burkina who were trained in France were immediately contacted to tell them that it was time to take action because you were trained for this, to serve France's interests. Most of these officers reported back to us. We took note and we continued to monitor. When an officer trained in France returns to his country and unfortunately dies, either by accident or on the battlefield. In France, there is a night of tribute to the fallen in the army, as there is everywhere else. During the night of tribute to the fallen, the name of the officer in question is mentioned, and it is said, died for France. They do not train him to serve his country, they train him to serve their state. And in many African states, there are plenty of such officers.